I wanted to literally pass away reading this book. Like I was so bored.
She just like wants to girl boss and have fun.
Again, I know I'm like spoiling it for you, but if you haven't seen the movie or the book, it's been a long time. It's been hundreds of years. Hey besties, it's Sarah. Today we're going to be kicking off a reading vlog for Jane Austen's novels. I've been kind of dabbling into classics lately. I read Anne of Green Gables for a different reading vlog and I enjoyed it so much that I bought the book and then I read the first 3 books of that series, and it got me thinking. Jane Austen is an author where I have pretty much enjoyed every single adaptation of her work that I've seen. I really like the Keira Knightley Pride and Prejudice. I really like the BBC version. I really like Sense and Sensibility. I love Clueless, which is also Emma, the Gwyneth Paltrow Emma, great. So I just thought, let's take a month, read all of her books, then we can rank them and I can let you guys know which ones are worth reading and which ones you should just skip and watch the adaptation. So let's just get into it. This is me reading all of Jane Austen's books, so you don't have to unless you want to.
So I have started the Jane Austen books and I looked up what would be the best order to read them, and I found this blog called the Female Scriblarian. I'm not really sure what she was trying to do with that pun, but I will put the link to it down below and put it on the screen. She said there was 2 ways to read it that she recommends, and number 1 being reading in written order, and then number 2 being reading in publication order. I think reading in publication order is really popular because that starts with like her most popular books like Sense and Sensibility and Pride and Prejudice, but I thought it would be more interesting to read them in written order so I could sort of experience Jane Austen's writing like as it progressed. And so something to know about Jane Austen's writing is that she has a bunch of books that she wrote when she was young that are called like her juvenilia. The way that I don't know how to pronounce any of these words. If you look it up on Wikipedia, there's like these books that she wrote like in her childhood and her early teen years that we now have access to, but I am going to be focusing on her main 6 novels. I am starting with Northanger Abbey because that was written around 1798 to 99. I think like an hour and a half into the audiobook, and I have to say, besties, I really thought after reading all of the Anne of Green Gable books that I would be able to keep up. Like I was like, I'm a classics girly now. I am in my classics era. I know how to understand what the girlies are trying to say. And to be honest, Anne of Green Gables was written like in the early 1900s, and these books were written in like the late 1700s, early 1800s. It's showing a bit in the language and I'm struggling a little bit. I had to turn down the speed on the audiobook from 2 times speed to like 1.5 because I was really struggling to keep up with what was going on in the story just because of some of the prose. Like the dialogue and the affectation of like how the narrator is saying things is easy to understand, but sometimes Jane Austen just like does her little writing thing and she'll kind of go off describing things in a way where I'm like, I saw the Northanger Abbey movie. I think it was like a BBC movie or something. Like, I don't really remember. I think I saw it on like PBS like back in the day. So I've seen that before, but I honestly didn't remember anything about it except for that the main character reads a gothic novel and it's kind of like taboo to read novels. I don't know. I'm learning a lot about the time period reading this. Our main character's name is Catherine and she's from, I think it's like kind of a small town. I think they mentioned there was like 40 families that lived in it. This couple that doesn't have children, it decides to go to Bath for the winter. And so they ask Catherine if she wants to go with them. And so she goes with them. And then she befriends this girl, Isabella, who's also there for the winter. I guess it's that social season thing. I think if you've seen any sort of like period dramas, then you would know that they do this where they like go places for certain seasons. She has already started the gothic novel that I remember from the movie. I think it's called Adolfo or something. I kind of want to look it up to see if it exists. They listed a couple of gothic novels. Catherine likes this guy named Mr. Tilney. She met him once like a week or 2 ago and they like walked around together. I guess it's another thing where like during the day, like when they're not at balls, they just like hang out and like walk around the parlor. He just showed up at the ball they're at and she really wanted to dance with him, but Isabella's brother John, who is really insufferable. What I really love about Jane Austen's writing is that you can tell which characters are meant to be charming and which ones are meant to be like annoying as fuck. And John is giving mansplaining, he's giving please go away. Catherine does not like him, but because he's like besties with her brother James, she feels like she has to be friendly to him, and obviously Isabella is her new best friend, so she feels like she's got to be like, yeah, John's cool. I think that this main character, Catherine, is meant to be more frivolous than some of the other characters that I've like seen in Jane Austen adaptations. Like I think a lot of people think of like Lizzie Bennet, who's like very clever, very smart, and Catherine's not really like that. She's kind of just interested in being pretty and wanting guys to like her. I don't know, there's something youthful and like fun about these types of characters. She just like wants to girl boss and have fun. So I will update you guys when I'm a little bit further in the book, but my verdict so far is that I'm just really trying really hard to get used to this older way of, you know, writing and speaking, and not feeling like I'm in English class. Like, it's kind of bringing back memories of like being in high school English and like not knowing what the books were trying to say. But I do feel like with my more like adult brain, I am following along better. And I also think audiobooks are helping because, you know, the narrator is doing a really good job of like saying the sentences in a way, almost like Shakespeare, where if you try to read Shakespeare, it's hard to understand, but if you see Shakespeare, you can like take in the lines better. And I feel like that's kind of how the audiobook is. I will say that while I was driving, I had a couple of times where my mind wandered, and that I can't be doing that because I won't know what she's saying, so I had to rewind a couple of times. But we're getting into this, and like I said, I'm in my classics era, and I'm really trying to not be an idiot, and I'm trying to understand. So I want to be a Jane Austen girly. Like, I want to be one of those girlies that's like, yeah, I've read all the Jane Austen books.
Hello, it has been a few days since I have updated you, and I have since finished Northanger Abbey, and I've also started Sense and Sensibility. It's been quite a while since we last spoke. I meant to give an update when I was halfway through Northanger Abbey, but as many of you will know if you've seen the moving vlog that I posted, I was moving last week and over the weekend, and I was so stressed out that I was reading, but I wasn't like, I just wasn't in the mindset to like film, especially because I was also filming a moving vlog, and it's a little bit like vlogception these days when I'm trying to film multiple vlogs at once. So we're trying to get the hang of it. Anyway, but I finished Northanger Abbey. I'm really not sure what I'm gonna rate it yet. I actually think I'm going to save rating all these books until the end when we do the ranking. But I want to say what my thoughts about Northanger Abbey. Number one, I would like to make a John Thorpe hate club. I actually just hate John Thorpe. What I love about Jane Austen's writing is that the way she writes people. Like, even though this was literally written like the late 1700s, that's like, is that like 200 years ago? It was a long time ago. The way these people act, people still be acting like this, especially men. So John Thorpe, like I said, gonna make a hate club for him. He is a mansplainer, a super mansplainer. The way that he is just so insufferable. And every time that Catherine tries to speak, he speaks over her. And even James Tilby, was his name James? I don't know, Tilby.
His name is Henry Tilney, you dumb bitch.
Even though he was the one that we wanted Catherine to end up with, and that was who Catherine liked, he was even kind of annoying. Jane Austen went out of her way multiple times to say that initially the only reason that James likes Catherine is because she likes him and that she's interested in everything he says. Because something I love about Catherine's character is that she is just so... naive might be the word, but I love that she just trusts everyone and she's super positive, and like when you tell her a story or you tell her something interesting, she's fascinated and she's just genuinely delighted. And I just feel like she was just like a very refreshing character. She wasn't really complex, she wasn't the smartest, but I just loved how she was just like a really positive little girly. Like, I really liked that about her. I also could tell that this is one of Jane Austen's like first like novels that she wrote as an adult. Like, you can definitely tell that the writing is not as mature as what I've been reading in Sense and Sensibility. Like I said, I have already started Sense and Sensibility, but I do have to go to an appointment, so I don't really have time to update you on that. So I will update you later. I'm probably about halfway through Sense and Sensibility, so we can talk more about that later in the vlog. The lighting in here is actually abysmal. I apologize for that. It's been about 7 hours since we last spoke, but I am now almost on Sense and Sensibility. Oh my god, why can I not speak this day? I am almost done with Sense and Sensibility. I'm just actually gonna stop saying the title. Sense and Sensibility. I literally just said I wasn't gonna say it, and then I said it. It's about the Dashwoods. So Eleanor, Marianne, and I think the younger sister's name is Fanny. They're all sisters. Their mother is the second wife of Mr. Dashwood. I don't remember what his first name was because he literally dies in chapter 1. But basically he dies, and he has a son from a first marriage. He decides that he should leave his estate to his son and then basically make his second wife and his daughters from that second marriage homeless. And so his son is, again, I can't remember his name either, is not a very generous guy, and he is married to, actually no, okay, his wife's name is Fanny. That's who Fanny is. Okay, I don't remember the name of the younger sister. She's really not a big character. So Fanny and Mr. Dashwood, whatever his name is, the son, inherit this house, and they're not very generous people. So initially the brother is like, I'm gonna give them money every year so that they can like feel well off, because his dad's like dying wish was like, I'll give you my estate, but like make sure that my other daughters and my, you know, my like now widowed wife will be taken care of. And the son's like, yeah. So he was like gonna give them all like £1,000 each. And then his wife Fanny was like, no, I don't think you should do that. Like, I don't think that's what your dad meant. I think your dad meant that you should like move furniture for them sometimes. That's like literally what she said. She's like, I just thought like if they moved, like we would help them move. But luckily, Mrs. Dashwood has a cousin, the Middletons. I think that's their names. I'm so sorry if I butcher all these names and all these characters. There's just a lot of characters in this one. He finds out that they don't have anywhere to live, and he's like, hey, I live in this like small little village. I've got a little cottage that you guys could have. You're my cousin. I'll take care of you. And so it was very generous. So they're like, okay, we will move there. So they move away to this little town. And then there's this character, Colonel Brandon. He very quickly takes a liking to Marianne, which I find very odd. So something I'm noticing about Jane Austen, and maybe just this time period, is that age gaps are pretty normal. Like in Northanger Abbey, Catherine, I think, was 17, and James, who she ends up marrying, is 26, which in present day, I would want that man to be arrested. But I guess in like 1790, that was all right. Marianne is 17 and Colonel Brandon is 35. Ew. And then their mom is like 40. Like, she's like, oh, Colonel Brandon's not that much younger than me. Why do you keep saying he's so old? I'm like, cause he is. What I like about Eleanor is that she's very level-headed, and her sister Marianne, flighty. Like, what, like, just passionate, does whatever she pleases. And Eleanor is very, I think that's where the title comes from, she's very sensible. Meanwhile, Miss Marianne girl, she falls in love with this guy Willoughby. It's bad news. It's bad news. He's a bad guy. What I'm liking about this is that there's more characters, there's more complexity to like the social cues and like the, you know, the relationships between the people. Also, the men are better in this one. Like, there are some annoying men for sure, but I feel like I don't hate as many of the men as I did in Northanger Abbey. Like I was saying, even James, the love interest from Northanger Abbey, was like, he was like funny and like a very clever character, but he was like only liked Catherine because she thought he was funny. But I feel like the men in this one are like men written by a woman. Okay, so apparently I deleted the last clip I had of like wrapping up my thoughts about Sense and Sensibility. And so here we are. I want to say almost 2 weeks later, because I had to pause and film a different vlog, and I had a lot going on with my move, yada yada yada. I keep saying this in every vlog that I'm filming. But anyway, let's just get back into talking about these Jane Austen books, because like I said, I finished Sense and Sensibility. Why can I not say that book title? And I had moved on to Pride and Prejudice, and I'm almost done with Pride and Prejudice. I have like an hour left of that audiobook. So final thoughts on Sense and Sensibility. I did it, I said it. I really loved the sisterly bond between Marianne and Eleanor and how different their personalities were. I just feel like you can see Jane Austen really mastering how to write characters. I have to say, Miss Austen originated the miscommunication trope, and you cannot tell me otherwise. The other girlies are trying to recreate it, but they're not doing it as well, because the miscommunication trope has a chokehold on the romance novel industry, but everyone's doing it poorly. But Miss Jane Austen, she's doing it well. It causes like angst and stress in her stories, and it's not like a miscommunication where someone just didn't ask what someone meant by something. In Jane Austen's books, the miscommunication is more so people withholding information because of propriety and just manners and just the social climate of the time. And so it works better in her books than it does in modern books, and I like it so much more. And it feels fresh, even though I've read it a million times. It feels like unique because I know that these books were written in like the early 1800s. So you can't tell me otherwise, but Jane Austen, she's doing it the way the other girlies are not. As far as the relationships that end up happening in this book, I don't know how I feel about Marianne and Colonel Brandon. I remember watching the movie back in the day with Kate Winslet and Alan Rickman and thinking like it was fine, because it was weird because Alan Rickman was like Professor Snape to me. But like, I don't know, the age gap, I still can't get over it. I understand this was a different time period. I understand that this was like socially okay for like literally like I think he's like 35-year-old man to be with a 17-year-old, but it still gave me the ick a little bit. But I will say that Colonel Brandon was really sweet, and he loved Marianne from afar, and he was very patient and never tried to like force her to like him. And so his like steadfastness is what makes Marianne eventually like him, and that's very sweet. But the age gap, I don't know about that. I'm so sorry, Jane Austen. I know I just complimented you on the miscommunication trope, but the age gap, not loving it because she's 17. Maybe if she was in her 20s. But Edward and Eleanor are pretty cute. And like I said, they were like really making the miscommunication trope really work. So I liked that, and I just liked everything about it. I just thought it was a really heartwarming story, and I loved the family, and I loved the community that they lived in, and I thought it was really funny as well. So those are my final thoughts on Sense and Sensibility. I have finally mastered that book title. So like I said earlier, I have moved on to Pride and Prejudice, and I'm almost done reading this. And as many of you know, this is probably Jane Austen's most popular work. Everyone and their mom loves Pride and Prejudice because of the 2005 movie version with Keira Knightley and Matthew McFadyen. I too get the hype. I think that movie is really good. I've also seen the miniseries with, I don't remember the girl's name, but it has Colin Firth in it. And I think both of them are really good, but obviously the 2005 film, just like the costumes, the cinematography, the hand holding, it's all there. I will start by saying that if you want to read Pride and Prejudice, you should not compare it to the movie. I feel like the movie is a creative take on the book where it, for the most part, follows the book, like the plot that happens, but some of the speeches and the things that characters say is not in the book. For example, when Lizzie's friend Charlotte, I think her name is Charlotte, goes off to marry the cousin, like the clergyman, in the movie, she makes this big speech to Lizzie talking about how like she doesn't have any prospects and she's a burden to her family and like she just needs to go marry someone, blah blah blah. That doesn't happen in the book, but it is a little bit implied that she knows she doesn't have a lot of chances to get married, and so she does that. So it's more like nuanced in the book. Like Jane Austen speaks to it in the narrative, and Charlotte definitely talks about like being happy to marry anyone, but it doesn't happen quite like it does in the movie. So it just feels like in Pride and Prejudice, Jane Austen was really upping her game as far as having a really big cast, because we saw that in Sense and Sensibility. Like in Northanger Abbey, there is really not that many characters. There's probably like 5 to 6, but I feel like in both Sense and Sensibility and Pride and Prejudice, we are really like upping the community and like who we really learn about and talk about. And I think that the characters in Pride and Prejudice are really well fleshed out, and they're very funny. I feel like the humor has been elevated even more in this as well. You can definitely see her reusing archetypes of people. Like there's definitely characters from this that I feel like I saw in her other 2 books. Like she just like has a certain like idea of men and women, and she kind of puts it into every single book. But I feel like these ones are the best written so far. I don't want to be a basic bitch, but I am thinking that Pride and Prejudice might be my favorite book so far. I know that's everyone's favorite, and I really want to be different, but I don't know if I am. I really hope that a curveball comes our way, and that maybe I end up liking like Mansfield Park or like Persuasion or something. That would be different. That would be interesting. I feel like a lot of people don't talk about those. Anyway, as I was saying, what I really like about the characters here is I feel like they have a lot of nuance and a lot of depth, and I feel like Miss Austen is just like honing her craft. One thing I will say is that I feel like Mr. Darcy is not as easy to love in the book. Like in the movie, he's played by like Matthew McFadyen, or in the miniseries, he's played by Colin Firth. And so even though he's being an asshole, you can kind of see his facial expressions, and you can see his love for Lizzie sort of grow. And in the book, he's just sort of a dick. And then the only way that you know that he likes Lizzie is by like Jane Austen telling you in the narrative. But even him liking her is very like begrudgingly, which I know happens in the adaptations as well, but in the book it's just like not done in a way where you like Mr. Darcy. But what I like about it in the book is that when the tides do turn and you do start liking Mr. Darcy, pretty much like at the point where he tells Lizzie about the truth about Willoughby. Is his name Willoughby? Or was Willoughby from Sense and Sensibility? Oh my god, what is his name? Wickham. His name was Wickham. Sorry, I was confusing Wickham and Willoughby. You see what I was saying about her reusing types of characters? I feel like Wickham and Willoughby are very similar, and they both have W names. Anyway, we get to the part where Lizzie and Mr. Darcy basically have an argument because he proposes to her, and she's like, bitch, like, no, like, what the fuck? Like, the way you asked me is so fucking rude. And then he tells her the truth, like, in a letter about Mr. Wickham. And yeah, like, I feel like at that part, the tides start to turn. Lizzie's feelings are changing. Our feelings are changing. Honestly, maybe this is also in the adaptation. I also just haven't seen the adaptation since like high school, so please forgive me if I'm wrong about them being more similar in that way, but I feel like I remember on screen liking Mr. Darcy a lot sooner than I did in the book. I realize I haven't told you the plot of Pride and Prejudice, but I kind of feel like if you're watching this video, then you probably are already a Jane Austen fan, or you at the very least really like the adaptations, but we'll just get into it anyway. So basically, we live in, I can't forget what the name of the town is. Honestly, I forget, but we live in a town, and there is this family, the Bennets, and they have like, I think it's like or 6 daughters, and Jane is the oldest, and then we have Lizzie. They're the 2 older sisters, and then we have a bunch of younger sisters, and their mom is like desperate to get them married. They're not like that well off, and their home technically doesn't belong to them. I forget what the name of it is, but basically they have like this agreement, like that's the law, that when Mr. Bennet dies, their home will get passed on to a cousin. And so the cousin does come up later in the story, which we'll get to. Early on, Mr. Bingley moves to this little abode, this little town, and he has everybody interested in him. It's like, who's this eligible gentleman? Like, whose eye is he gonna catch? Who's going to catch his eye? That's the saying. And lo and behold, Miss Jane catches his attention. And then Mr. Darcy and Lizzie have a very rude meeting where basically Bingley is trying to get Darcy to dance, and he suggests that he dances with Lizzie, and Mr. Darcy basically calls Lizzie ugly and she overhears him, and so then she ends up hating him. But then this guy Wickham comes to town, and he is a soldier, and he's really like hot, sexy, very outgoing. He's very personable, and Mr. Darcy is not. And so very quickly Wickham gets Lizzie to believe that Mr. Darcy is evil, and that he and Wickham have like this long history, and basically Darcy like withheld him from inheriting money that Mr. Darcy's father like meant for Wickham to have, and it's this whole thing. So we spend a lot of the novel thinking, I mean, if you hadn't seen the adaptation, you would be thinking that Darcy bad, Wickham good. The cousin who is supposed to inherit the estate comes to town, and he basically decides that he wants to marry Lizzie, and Lizzie's like, no, I will not actually be doing that. And so he ends up marrying her friend Charlotte, as I mentioned earlier, and yada yada yada. A bunch of stuff happens. We end up finding out that Mr. Wickham lied, and Darcy is actually the good guy. And at the point I am in the book, Elizabeth is like kind of digging Mr. Darcy now, but her younger sister, who I cannot remember her name, has run off with Wickham, because after Lizzie finds out that Wickham is bad, she just doesn't tell anybody in her family. See, again, this is little Miss Austen using the miscommunication trope / the withholding information trope to ruin everything and make drama, and we love to see it. So yeah, that is the point I'm at in the book, where the sister ran off. Obviously I've seen a lot of adaptations, so I do kind of know what happens, but I am interested to see like how the book ends, because obviously the movie is a lot more romantic and has a lot more embellished towards the end. Like there's just a lot more like kind of romance Hollywood things, and so very curious to see how the book ends. Okay, so a couple of things happened since we last spoke. Number one, I bought a box set of Jane Austen's books. I couldn't help myself. When I like something, I don't like it casually. Like, and I love these editions by Penguin. They're amazing. Like, look at them. They're just gorgeous. So I'm gonna hold these up for the rest of the video. But I finished Pride and Prejudice, and as we expected, I loved it. Besties, I'm a basic bitch. I'm probably gonna rank this pretty highly when I rank the books. We loved it. I thought it compared pretty well to the movies. I had heard people say that they were sad that some of the stuff from the movie's not in this. He does not say that she's bewitched him body and soul, which is disappointing, but I still thought it was funny. I still thought it was cute. We really liked this. But then after that really great reading experience of Pride and Prejudice, I moved on to Mansfield Park. And let me just tell you, besties, this is egregious. This is abhorrent. I hated every minute of this book. The plot, a doozy. The characters, disgusting. If Jane Austen weren't already dead, electric chair for this book. So let me just take you through it. We've got 3 sisters when we start out. We've got Mariah, Frances, and I can't remember the middle sister's name, but Mariah, she catches the eye of this rich guy, Sir Thomas Bertram. So she becomes Lady Bertram, and she's just living her life being a rich lady. And so then her sister, the one that I can't remember her name, she ends up marrying the clergyman that like works in the parish around where Mansfield Park is, because that is where Sir Thomas and Lady Bertram live. And so she becomes Mrs. Norris, and that's her whole gig, is that she is the clergyman's wife. And then the third sister, Frances, she goes off and marries a sailor. But the sailor, he's not a nice guy. And it makes her have a falling out with her sisters, because they're like, you married below your station, like, why did you do that, blah, 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 like, you kind of fucked up your life. So then Frances has 9 kids. And because she's been estranged from her sisters for a long time, she kind of realizes, like, it's gonna be hard for me to help my kids get like places in life. So she writes to Lady Bertram and says like, hey, like, do you think Sir Thomas could like do something for my oldest son William? Like, I know he's got connections to like the Navy and stuff, like could you do something about that? And so then Mrs. Norris gets this idea, because she's like this busybody, full of herself, like holier than thou lady, because she's married to a clergyman, but she's like, what if we were just like so charitable and we wrote to Francis and said, just send us one of your kids and we'll raise it, because like you're poor and you have 9 kids, like just send one over. So basically they decide to take in the one daughter of the 9 kids. Her name's Fanny. I do want to give you a trigger warning before I even tell you the rest of the plot, but this is about Fanny falling in love with her cousin Edmund. Disgusting. I'm so sorry, Jane Austen. I know the times were different, but revolting. Like, I already overlooked the age gap of Marianne and Colonel Brandon because I was like, you know what, it's different back then. But cousins? Cousins. Miss Girl. Fanny grows up with them. Edmund is her bestie because everyone else in the house is really mean to her. Like, the other girls are like, you don't speak French, you don't know how to do math, like you're not a genius, like you've never had like a governess the way that we have, like you're poor and stupid. And so Edmund is the only one that's like, hey girly, you can be my bestie, I'll bring you around, I'll make sure that everyone's nice to you. So Fanny just kind of grows up really quiet, really soft-spoken. This other family comes to town, the Grants. There's Mary and her brother Henry, and Mary quickly catches the eye of Edmund, and so the majority of this book is Edmund chasing after Mary and Fanny just being nice and being like, it's okay, I'm jealous, but it's okay. And she's just like a little whiny baby. Like, she's just like the worst female character that Jane Austen has ever written. Like, if I was gonna rank the female characters, dead last. I'm sorry if you like Fanny Price. Fanny Price is not for me. She's just a weak character. She's so boring. Edmund doesn't even consider Fanny as a romantic option until like one paragraph towards the end of the book, when it doesn't work out with Mary, and he's like, you know what, maybe I could marry Fanny, she's kind of nice. Because again, up to this point, he referred to her as cousin and was like, this is my cousin, my cousin, my cousin, my cousin who's like a sister. And then he just randomly decides that, you know what, I'm gonna marry Fanny, and then they get married, and it's an off-page marriage, and it's so boring. I'm gonna actually put this down because I realized that me holding it like this is actually wearing the design off, which shame on you, Penguin, for making those designs so easy to wear off. But anyway, I feel like I've already told you too much about the plot, but I just wanted to rant about this and make fun of it as a book because it was not romantic. Fanny was so boring. So to sum up my thoughts on Mansfield Park, I don't think it's going to be a surprise when I go to rate these books later, and this probably is last on the list. I'm going to give it 1 star on Goodreads. Like, it's just honestly a blemish on Jane Austen's library of works. Like, I'm very disappointed in her for writing that. And I know she died in literally like 1830, but I'm so sorry, Miss Janie. This one should have stayed in the transcripts. You should not have published this one. But despite Jane Austen wronging me with the existence of Mansfield Park, I did get a palate cleanser with Emma. I am probably a quarter of the way through this, and I love this so far. I do have to give the disclaimer that Clueless is one of my favorite movies of all time. Like, when I was a kid, the grip that Clueless had on me, like, I watched Clueless no less than like 20 times. In this book, we have Emma, and she has decided that she is a matchmaker. And she's probably one of the more unlikable heroines of Jane Austen's work. Apparently, Jane Austen actually set out to create a character that people wouldn't like, because something about Emma is that she's very rich, she's very spoiled, people don't often tell her when she's doing things wrong. And so, like I was saying, she suddenly decided that she's a matchmaker because she grew up with this governess that she absolutely adored, and there was a widow that lived near her estate. So she decided that she was gonna match them up, so they end up getting married at the very beginning of the book. And so Emma's like, you know what, I know how to match people up. I am actually a millionaire matchmaker. Like, that's who I am. And so she's like, I will have my own Bravo TV show. So she meets this girl, Harriet, who is like the new girl in town because she is an orphan and she lives in like the boarding school nearby. And Emma's basically like, I'm gonna raise your station. Like, I'm gonna make you so desirable to everyone, and everybody's not even gonna remember that you're an orphan. If you've seen Clueless, Harriet is Brittany Murphy's character, who's like the new girl at school. So far, I absolutely love this. I love all the characters. I love Mr. Knightley, even though the age gap is again weird. At least with Colonel Brandon and Marianne, she was already like mostly grown for the time period when he meets her. Like, she's already 17 when they meet. But in this one, Mr. Knightley has known Emma since she was a baby. Like, he was 16 when she was born. They literally talk about him being there when she was born, like in the house. So that's weird. And I do know they end up together, so, because like I said, I know where this book is going. So that's a little weird. But I still really love his character, and I love him and Emma. Like, they spar a lot because Mr. Knightley is the only person that ever tells Emma that she's wrong about things. I absolutely adore Emma's father in this book. I really liked the dad from Pride and Prejudice, but I think I like Emma's dad even more. He is just so funny because he's very obsessed with having his family close with him because he's very lonely because he's a widow. Like Emma's mother passed away when she was young, and he just like really loves his daughters being close. And so Emma's older sister Isabella lives in London with her husband, who is Mr. Knightley's brother, and he's always complaining about how Isabella won't come to stay longer than like a week at a time because of her husband's job. And it's just, he's so funny. Like he always is making comments about like, why does no one stay with us? And like when the governess gets married in the beginning of the book, he's like, why did she have to leave us? And Emma's like, she literally had to go get married, like it's fine, like she has a nice house now. And the dad's like, well, why did she have to leave us? Like I miss her. And he's just like a really funny and really wholesome character. I love him a lot. I really like the humor in this, and like I said, I totally think that my adoration of this book stems from me liking Clueless. I need to read more of this, so I'm gonna go do that. Probably also gonna go take this makeup off. I filmed a video today. I filmed a book haul, so you'll see that video soon. But yeah, I am just loving Jane Austen so far, except for Mansfield Park. Fuck Mansfield Park. Okay, so I finished Emma. I didn't love it as much towards the end as I thought I was going to love it. I do think I liked it more than other people. I've been looking into a lot of Goodreads reviews and other people's ranking videos on YouTube, and a lot of people rank Emma pretty low because they don't really like her character or they don't really like the pacing, and I can see some of what they're saying. To be honest, towards the end, it gets very convoluted. I wish that Jane Austen had allowed multiple plot points to be happening at once. In the beginning of the novel, we have Emma trying to match Harriet up with Mr. Elton, and then that part of the story closes. And then we have Frank Churchill coming to town, as well as Jane Fairfax. And then we have that portion of the story, and then the portion of the story where Emma and Mr. Knightley actually become a thing is very, very, very towards the end. Like it's honestly like probably the last few pages of the book. And so I don't know, I think the pacing was a little bit all over the place. I still think it was written well, and I did like the characters, and I did think it was funny, but ultimately I don't know if I'm going to rank it quite as highly as I thought I was going to. Like I was really thinking it was going to end up being my favorite, but I'm not sure if that's the case. I moved on to Persuasion, and I've actually already finished it, and I have amazing news, besties. I loved Persuasion. It was chef's kiss. It was so good. It honestly is slept on. In this book, we have our main character, Anne, and she's a little bit later in life. She's an older girly. She is, I think, 28, and she has two sisters. One of them, Mary, who's younger, and then an older sister named Elizabeth. So she and Elizabeth have never been married, but Mary is married. No pun intended. And so she and Elizabeth live with their father, Sir Walter. And something you need to know about Sir Walter is that man, he loves a lavish lifestyle. He loves to spend money, lifestyles of the rich and the famous. Unfortunately for him, their fortune is starting to dwindle. And so they're kind of in danger of being in severe debt and losing their estate. And so his advisors basically tell him, we need to come up with a financial plan so that you guys don't end up in ruin. And so they come up with the idea that they are going to rent out their estate, and they will go stay in Bath, because in Bath it'll be easier to keep up appearances that they're like a noble family. So the couple that ends up renting the estate is actually related to a certain gentleman that Anne knew when she was a lot younger. So when Anne was in her early 20s, she came across a man named Captain Frederick Wentworth, and they fell madly in love, and they ended up getting engaged. He was staying in the countryside for the summer, and it was a fling. They loved each other and they wanted to be married. Anne brought this engagement to her family, and they convinced her to break it off because he was not wealthy. She has never been able to forget Captain Wentworth, and he has just been on her heart and on her mind ever since. I think it's been about 7 years, and truly no man has compared. The man that actually married her younger sister Mary proposed to her first because he was like a well-off guy like in the countryside, and Anne actually declined him because for her, Captain Wentworth is the one and only. So because this couple that is related to him, I think the wife is Captain Wentworth's sister, because they're renting that, Captain Wentworth ends up coming to the countryside again, and Anne doesn't know what to do with herself because he has been the great love of her life, and she's never stopped thinking about him even though they have not spoken since they broke off their engagement. And so that's kind of where the book goes. I'm not actually going to spoil this one. I don't really want to talk much about what happens because it was so good. It was so good. I loved it. It was just so romantic. It was a second chance romance. The way that Jane Austen pioneered romance tropes for the romance industry, everyone should thank Jane Austen for what she did for her people. What I really loved about this book is that this is one of her more serious books. I actually had seen some reviews where they were like, this is really serious and dramatic, and that's why I didn't like it. But I feel like they weren't really like grasping the characters because there's so much humor in it. there is the character of Mary, who's the sister, and she's just so hilarious because basically when Sir Walter and Elizabeth go off to Bath, she begs them to let Anne stay with her because she is always complaining about no one paying her attention, and her relationship with her husband is so funny. They always fight, they always bicker, and she's always saying like the funniest things, and she's not even trying to be funny. She's just like a really kind of selfish and like frivolous person, and so everything she says is just kind of humorous. And Anne is just a darling. I loved Anne so much as a character. She was a lot like Fanny Price, honestly, and as you know, I hate Fanny Price, but I think she's like a better version. Like, she kind of reminds me of Jane, the older sister from Pride and Prejudice, and then she also reminds me of Eleanor from Sense and Sensibility. She's kind of got all those like gracious qualities that those characters have, and like Fanny, she's a little bit like timid, but her timidness is not as off-putting as Fanny's because, and also she's not in love with her cousin, so you know, that's always an improvement. Although there is a little bit of cousin romance in this book as well. I don't know, Jane Austen was just a product of her time. I just feel like this book was perfectly paced, and it wasn't too long, but it wasn't too short, and it was just really romantic, and I loved feeling like Anne and Captain Wentworth had this like long-standing history, and they kept glancing at each other, and they were longing, but there was miscommunication, but they got over it, and it was just, it was so good. It was so good. But that brings me to the end of this reading vlog portion where I just enjoyed all of Jane Austen's great literary works. And so the next clip you're going to see is me ranking the books. I think I might do like a worst to best sort of thing, so you can see like which book I hated. I feel like we already know which one that is, and then we can see which one I favored. And so I'm gonna really like think on this, and I'll probably film that clip tomorrow, and then we'll close out the video. And I really hope you guys have been enjoying this so far. So the time has come to finally rank these Jane Austen books. I know you've all been waiting for this. Honestly, I truly believe that some people just probably hit the timestamp in the description to get to this part and skip the vlog part, but no matter how you're here, we're gonna rank the books now. I'm going to rank them from worst to best. So let's just get into it. Number 6, the last place, is going to have to go to Mansfield Park. This is not a huge surprise. I did talk in the vlog about how much I hate this book. Fanny Price is the bane of my existence. I don't like her. I don't like her story. I don't like that she married her first cousin. A lot of grossness happening in this book. So this is Jane Austen's worst work. Honestly, if I could put this like even farther down than slot 6, like I have to put it in 6 because there's only 6 books, but if it could be like spot number 147, that's where this book would be. But I really did not like this book at all. So these next 2 slots are honestly interchangeable. I went back and forth a lot on which one I wanted to be ahead of the other, and for various reasons I was having a really hard time deciding, but I think I'm pretty settled with this ranking, although I'm a little bit disappointed in it as well. So let's just get into that. In spot number 5 we have Emma. And the reason I'm disappointed in putting this in slot number 5 is that I genuinely really like this book. I find it funny, I find it complex, I really like the romance in it, but the reason it had to go below the next one is because I don't really love it towards the end. I think I mentioned this in my vlog clip earlier, but it gets a little convoluted. I really wish that Jane Austen could have written multiple plot points to be happening at once. So it could have been like complexly interwoven, but in this, she ends up just kind of doing it in like almost like chapters or sections. In the beginning, we have her trying to match up Harriet with Mr. Elton, and then we have her trying to talk to Frank Churchill, and then we have her being jealous of Mr. Knightley, and it's just like everything kind of was segmented, and I really wish that it would have flowed a little bit better, but I feel really bad putting this in slot number 5 because like I said, Mansfield Park is like the worst book I've ever read. Not really, but it's really bad. I really did not like it. And so I feel like for this to be so close to Mansfield Park kind of hurts my feelings, and like I've mentioned a million times in this video, I absolutely love Clueless, which is an adaptation of Emma, and so I'm just a little bit disappointed that the written form of this kind of fell so low on my list. But I think if I was ranking like adaptations, this would rank a lot higher, but I am satisfied in my soul with this rating and this ranking, but I'm also kind of disappointed, if that makes any sense. So in 4th place, we have Sense and Sensibility. I decided to rank this higher than Emma because genuinely this is just better written. I think that this has more intrigue as far as the characters, and there's a little bit more flow to the ideas and like the way that the story plays out. I think in my heart I love Emma more, but if I am ranking this based on like which book is better, I definitely think that this one should be in slot number 5, but I'm also like disheartened to say that, if that makes any sense. But this is a phenomenal book. I really liked this, and the sisterly bond, everything about this is really good, as I mentioned earlier in the vlog. But yeah, this is in slot number 5. Okay, so the next one is actually gonna be a little controversial because technically it is not better written than Emma or Sense and Sensibility, but in my heart, I just love it a lot more. My enjoyment was a lot higher with this one, and that is Northanger Abbey. This, again, is not her best writing. This was the first book that she ever wrote after her juvenilia, and the pacing's a little bit off. I think I mentioned that in the vlog, and I didn't like love the love interest. Like, he wasn't as good as the love interest in Emma and Sense and Sensibility, but at the same time, this is so much funnier. This is a gothic parody, and it just hits right. Like, I think about this book way more than I think about Sense and Sensibility, so that's why it had to rank higher. But technically, if you were to look at my ratings, or like on the plot and the pacing and all of that, it technically rates lower than Sense and Sensibility, but this is more of like an emotional ranking. What I really like about this is that Jane Austen breaks the fourth wall a lot. She talks to you as a reader. She didn't really keep that up in the rest of her writing style, but I really enjoyed that in this. I kind of missed it in the rest of the books, and she's very tongue-in-cheek. I also really enjoy like her observational humor, like the way that she depicts the men. I know I mentioned this a million times, but the way she depicts them is just so funny. It's just so interesting, and I really liked Catherine as a character. Again, I did think that the ending was a little bit rushed, and I wish that they had gone to Northanger Abbey a little bit earlier in the book instead of being in Bath for most of the novel. But to be honest, I still think this deserves to be in slot number 4. My top 2 books are honestly probably going to be controversial as well. I feel like if you watched the vlog portion of this, you're probably gonna guess which was my favorite and which was my second favorite, but I'm happy to say that I did not end up being a basic bitch, because slot number 2 goes to Pride and Prejudice, which is most people's number 1. I did genuinely love this, and I can honestly say that this is one of Jane Austen's best written works. Like, it makes sense why it's number 1 for a lot of people. Like, this is just genuinely a very good book. Mr. Darcy's probably one of the best love interests that she's written. We love that it's like sort of an enemies to lovers thing, and Lizzie is just so clever and so smart and very like fun to read from out of all of the female characters that she has. And then like the family and the father and the mother, like everything about this is very funny, and the complexity of the drama and everything, like how everything unfolds, is just chef's kiss. Like, we love this book, and I think that if you are a fan of the adaptations, you should definitely read this. I think that it makes sense that this is number 1 for most people. So yeah, you can't not put Pride and Prejudice in your top 3, I feel. Okay, and so spot number 1, as you would have guessed by process of elimination / if you watched my last vlog clip, is Persuasion. Persuasion is so good. Flawless, amazing, sensational, everything that Lady Gaga says in that one clip. It's just one of the best books I've ever read. Like, I love this. This is definitely gonna end up in my favorites of the year. Anne and Captain Wentworth, there's something about a second chance romance, and also reading about a character that's like older, like she's kind of considered like towards the end of her age for like getting married. Like, I think she's like 28, and everything about this is just relatable and cute and good. Like, if you are a single girly like in your later 20s, like I feel like you would relate to Anne, especially if you have like a one that got away. Like, it's just really good second chance romance. Miss Jane Austen is just out there inventing the tropes for the future romance authors. Like, we love to see it. The girlies are enjoying it. The girlies are loving it. We are live, laugh, loving. I just love this. I will be honest, I think if I were ranking the female characters of Jane Austen's novels, then I probably would rank Lizzie Bennet above Anne, but I still really enjoyed reading Anne's perspective. Well, it's in third person, but you know what I mean, like reading about her and what she's thinking and feeling. And I feel like she was just a really sweet little girly, and I really enjoyed that. And this book made me feel the most. Like, I definitely felt good when I was reading Pride and Prejudice, but this one I was the least familiar with besides Mansfield Park. Like, I had seen a movie of this in high school, but I didn't really remember it. I knew that it was a second chance romance, and that it was like her family had convinced her not to get married to the guy that she loved, and now they're meeting up later in life, but I didn't remember much about it. And I think that this one just really excited me and made me feel a lot of emotions. It's also pretty short, like in comparison to Pride and Prejudice. I feel like you can get through it pretty quickly, and I don't feel like there were any slow portions of this. Like, I was hooked the whole time through, and I loved all the characters and everyone who ended up with everyone, like all the couples. Like, totally a huge fan. And I still found this to be very funny, even though I saw a lot of people saying that this was a serious book. It is serious, but there's also very humorous characters and funny things to be said. So I don't know, I loved this. It might be controversial to make this number 1, but I don't care, girlies. I do not care. But that finally brings us to the end of this vlog. Can you believe this? I have been reading Jane Austen books for like over a month. It's kind of crazy. I did take a break to do Koreadathon. If you haven't seen my Koreadathon vlog, you can go watch that. But beyond reading Korean authors, I was only reading Jane Austen. And so I'm happy to be done, but I also will miss Jane Austen. I know for a fact I will reread most of these books. Not Mansfield Park, that's fine. But all the rest of the books I definitely will be rereading. I love them so much. And I think I might do a project this year where I watch every single Jane Austen adaptation in existence and then do like a tier ranking. So if you're interested in seeing me do that, tell me down below. But that will take some time, because probably what my plan is to watch all of them and like take notes on what I think of each one, and then I'll film the tier ranking, like kind of saying where they land. But that will take a lot of time because I already compiled the list of all the adaptations, and it's like at least 30 things that I'd have to watch, and some of them are miniseries. So that's a whole other project. But if you're interested in seeing me do that, I think that would be cool, because I'll also probably cover some adaptations that you weren't aware existed. But yeah, I really loved this so much. I am a huge Jane Austen super fan now. Like, I'm a classics girly. We love that for me. But yeah, let me know down below what you thought of this video, and if you have any other classics that you think I should read. I have had people already mention they want me to read like Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre, so I might do like a Bronte sisters video that's sort of like this, where I like vlog it and then rank it. Let me know if that would interest you. Let me know if this format was good for you, or if you would just prefer like a sit down ranking without the vlog. But I thought I'd give you a taste of both, so you can skip to the ranking if you want, but you can also watch the vlog if you want. But yeah, I'm really excited that I made this, and I'm so excited that I read Jane Austen. I can't talk. That is a theme in this vlog, that I literally cannot speak English. Thank you all so much for watching. You're all beautiful. Have a nice day.